On the Farm Bureau guest line, check out favorites.com and go with the home team. Ben, of course, we appreciate your time. Before we get into previewing the team, I've been wanting to ask somebody that covers Tennessee this since it happened. What the heck happened in Columbia, South Carolina last year?
That's the question that Tennessee fans are still asking themselves. Felt like a golden opportunity to sneak into the college football playoffs there in Columbia, although a lot of fans were upset that Tennessee was maybe ranked a little bit lower, and particularly upset about being ranked behind Alabama, who they had beaten a couple weeks prior. But it obviously wasn't their day, especially offensively. I think Tennessee's offense last year covered up a lot of the defensive warts, and the offense made them look prettier than what they were. And that particular night, you kind of got to tip your hat to Spencer Rattler. He had a career night against Tennessee and was able to lead that South Carolina offense to a victory. And because of the defense, the offense just wasn't able to play catch up, and then kind of started pressing. And Hendon Hooker gets hurt, tears his ACL, and kind of from that moment on, that game was lost. But there were also some things behind the scenes. Jeremy Banks was suspended for that game, Tennessee starting middle linebacker, and he caused some issues in the locker room, quite frankly, that week leading into the game. So that carried over onto the field. And for a defense that had its issues, like that was the worst performance of the year for the defense. And it was no coincidence after they had some issues with Jeremy Banks in the locker room that week.
I forgot about the ranking thing. I remember we spent time on this show talking about it, and our takeaway was, what's the point of playing the games? What's the point? Identical record. You have a head-to-head matchup. One beat the other, and still one, the loser is ahead of the other. Make that make sense. Of course, I guess it ultimately didn't matter, but still, that was bizarre. I imagine your subscribers were not real pleased with that, nor should they have been. Joe Milton. So we've seen him once and lost his job to the aforementioned Hendon Hooker. All the talent in the world, right? What held him back, and what's the word out of Tennessee? Has he rectified that?
Yeah, I think Joe Milton's going to have a really, really good season. How good of a season, I don't know, but he is talented enough and has the natural skill set to go out there and replicate Hendon Hooker's season. He absolutely does. There was a reason that he beat out Hendon Hooker for the starting job 2 years ago. There's a reason he was a high-profile quarterback coming out of Florida and signed with Michigan. He has all the arm talent in the world. I'm sure you all there in Mississippi have even seen the viral videos of him chunking it the length of a football field, and most recently did it at the Manning Passing Academy. So he has all the skill set and the traits that you want, but when he got to Tennessee and at Michigan, he was an athlete playing quarterback. That was his issue, and you saw the overthrows and why those jokes became so popular on social media because of how many overthrows he had throughout a game. And he did get hurt and a little banged up, which helped Hendon Hooker take the job from him. But I do think that Hendon was on his way to taking that job from him, regardless of injury or not. So Hendon was the guy last year. Joe Milton was number 2. But I thought you could tell a difference in Joe Milton last season. Even in mop-up duty against cupcake teams, he just looked like a different guy throwing the football. I don't care if it's Alabama State or Alabama. You can show touch on the football against either opponent. And he was not showing that at all the year prior against Bowling Green to start the year or even Pittsburgh week 2. So I thought you could tell a different Joe Milton early. I think you have to give Josh Heupel and Joey Halzle a lot of credit for developing him. And then he kind of showed that off against Vanderbilt and Clemson to end the season. Beat down Vanderbilt the way that you should beat down Vanderbilt, but against a Clemson defense that had a lot of NFL guys on it, he looked really, really good. And again, he looked more like a quarterback and a passer rather than an athlete trying to throw the football. So I think he's matured a lot. I think the Monday through Friday, everything that goes into being a quarterback at a high level, the preparation, I think he's matured a lot in that area. He's a much better leader now, and kind of the guys really rally behind him. And I'm a big believer in Josh Heupel and Joey Halzle as quarterback developers. Their track record at this point kind of speaks for itself. So I think Joe Milton's going to have a really, really good year. The question is how good, and if he lives up to his potential. I mean, Tennessee's going to replicate the success that it had last season.
You know, Ben, when you think about rebuilding programs and what Heupel walked into, normally, year one, tough year. And then year two, you see improvement and maybe 7-8 wins. And then year three is the big year. And it feels like Tennessee's ahead of schedule, obviously. Last year, the way they played. Can they replicate that? Never mind with Milton taking over for Hooker. They have some other key losses at the skill positions, but I think this is still a really good football team. How much of last year can they replicate in 2023? Yeah,
I think they can replicate exactly what they did, quite honestly. I know that sounds a little crazy because they are still building the program, right? Like, they don't have championship-level depth. I don't expect them to go win an SEC championship. I don't expect them to go win a national championship, which they weren't going to do last year, and they still won 11 games and beat Alabama, beat Clemson, beat LSU, beat Florida. Beat a lot of big teams on their schedule. But you saw the difference in Kirby Smart having his program established in Athens and Josh Heupel being in year two. And I realize that Kirby Smart is really rocking and rolling right now, but he's also several years into this thing, and Josh Heupel's just now getting started. I guess a little further down the road now that he's in year three, but they're still trying to accumulate talent and depth. But what allows them to be so good and be so successful like they were last year is Heupel's offense. I mean, it's hard to slow down if you're an opposing defense, and he had his ways with just about everybody on the schedule but Georgia last year, and a little bit of that South Carolina game as well. So I think the offense alone gives them a chance to go out and replicate and be in that 9 to 10 to 11 win range. And they are losing key pieces. I mean, Hendon Hooker, he will be remembered in Knoxville for the rest of his life, and fans absolutely adore him. But Joe Milton has as much talent, if not more, like we just talked about. Jalen Hyatt moves on. Cedric Tillman moves on. But Brew McCoy is back. Dante Thornton is an Oregon transfer who has turned a lot of heads this offseason, and they say that he can run just as well as Jalen Hyatt. Ramel Keaton is a veteran who is playing the best football of his career, and I think he's going to be the most consistent receiver in that room this year. And they have some young guys as well. Their running back room is really, really solid. They don't have that one big-time go-to back, but they have 3 or 4 that are capable of getting the job done. Now, the question is, obviously Joe Milton kind of touched on that, but also the offensive line. That, to me, was the biggest reason Tennessee was able to go out and have the offensive success that they had last year. Darnell Wright anchoring the right side of the offensive line, and he was the number 10 overall pick in this past draft for a reason. They have to replace him. They went out and got a transfer from Miami, and they're hoping that he'll be able to fill his shoes. John Campbell, and it sounds like he's having a nice offseason. And then Jerome Carvin, kind of a veteran offensive lineman who went undrafted, but just kind of one of those linchpins that you need within an offensive line. He kind of played center, played guard, very versatile. So they're missing 2 key pieces up there along the offensive line, but they do have bodies up there. So they have, although they lose a lot, they have guys ready to step into roles. It's just a matter of, kind of like I was talking with Joe, it's just a matter of how well they step into those roles. But just generally speaking, simply put, like Josh Heupel's offense is going to always allow them a chance to have a high level of success, even if the defense isn't adequate like it was last year. And I do think that defense is going to take a nice step this year. So you may lose a little bit on offense, but I do think you gain a little bit, if not more, on the defensive side as well.
Ben, excellent stuff. Thank you so much for giving us a little bit of time to talk about Tennessee Vols football. It's there's been an old joke. You kind of mentioned it. Vols are back. Vols are back. Vols are back. But it kind of feels like now that they are. So we'll see if they can follow up a good year with another one. Thank you so much for your time, man.
Absolutely. I'd be surprised if Josh Heupel flames out. He seems to have got it rocking and rolling at this point. So appreciate y'all, and thanks for having me on, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you. You too. That's Ben McKee from GoVols247 on the Farm Bureau guest line. Check out favorites.com and go with the home team. Yeah, man, the hype machine is rolling. But for the first time in a long time, there is justification for it.
What's interesting to me about Tennessee is this. There's a lot of talk about Tennessee in terms of, well, if Milton doesn't do well, though, the problem is, as Ben just told us, physically Milton is the most talented quarterback in the conference by a pretty wide margin, I would tell you. What if he's just a unicorn? What if he puts it all together and he has a, Burrow, Cam Newton, Bryce Young kind of year? Then Tennessee is a guy like that can go head to head with Georgia.